She introduced me as the useless daughter, I said, and for a second the room at my table went absolutely still. And then the governor's chief of staff stood up, pointed across the room, and said, quietly enough that only the first 3 rows could hear it, "Wait, is that the woman who saved the watershed contract?" My mother turned the color of uncooked dough. I want to tell you what led to that moment. I want to tell you about the wedding. Yes, the one I attended as a guest at my own sister's celebration. The one where I sat at table 11, which is near the kitchen and far from the head table, and apparently also far from the category of people my parents considered worth claiming in public. I want to tell you about my mother's voice when she said it. Not sharp, not cruel in any deliberate way, but light, the way you'd describe a piece of furniture you're getting rid of. "Oh, that's just Maya. She never quite became anything," said to the chief of staff himself, who had turned in his chair to ask who I was, because he recognized me from a project briefing 3 months earlier that my parents knew absolutely nothing about. Said, in front of 47 people at the tables nearest the microphone. Said, with a small laugh that my sister did not correct, and my father examined the centerpiece to avoid reacting to. My daughter Nora was not at the wedding. She had not been invited. 8 years old, and my sister had a flower girl and a junior bridesmaid, both of them my brother-in-law's nieces, and Nora's invitation had simply never arrived. When I called to ask about it, my mother said, without a pause, "The wedding is very adult-oriented. You understand." I did not understand, but I said nothing, and I watched Nora's face when I came home alone that night, and she was pretending to sleep, and her shoulders were doing the thing they do when she is holding something together so carefully she's afraid to move. 2 weeks after the wedding, I sent my mother a gift. When she opened it, she went very quiet, and then she called me 4 times in 40 minutes. I didn't answer until the 5th call, and when I did, I said 3 sentences and hung up. She has not used that particular tone with me since, but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to where this actually starts. My name is Maya Sullivan. I am 34 years old. I work in environmental policy for a regional land trust, which is not the kind of job that announces itself at dinner parties, but which is the kind of job that occasionally puts you in the same room as the governor's office staff when 100,000 acres of protected watershed are on the line. I live in a small city in the mid-Atlantic region, in a house I bought by myself 3 years ago, in a neighborhood where the trees are old and the sidewalks are uneven, and the coffee shop on the corner knows my order. I have a daughter named Nora, who is 8 and owns 17 books about deep-sea creatures, and hums without realizing it. I have a partner named Derek, who is quiet in the way that rivers are quiet, always moving, never dramatic about it. My parents are Gary and Linda Sullivan. My father is a man who has spent his entire adult life perfecting the art of strategic absence. He is present in every room, but somehow never quite there when a decision is being made. My mother is the kind of woman who says, "I treat my children exactly the same," with the absolute confidence of someone who has never once cross-examined that belief. My sister is Cassandra, 31, who is not a villain. I want to be precise about that. Cassandra is a person who grew up inside a system that told her she was the main character, and she believed it the way any reasonable person believes the thing that has been true their entire life. She is not cruel. She is just unexamined. There is a difference, and it matters. There is also Derek's mother, a woman named Phyllis, who lives 40 minutes north and bakes poorly, but loves with a consistency that has nothing to do with performance. Phyllis noticed things about Nora that my own mother never thought to notice. That she only asks for a second helping when she's comfortable, that she squares her shoulders before entering a room where she feels uncertain, that she stopped asking to call Grandma Linda after the 3rd unreturned voicemail. Phyllis noticed. Phyllis said nothing yet, but she was already planning something. Family dinners are never just dinners. They are auditions. If you have ever sat at a table where one person at that table belonged a little less than everyone else, if you have ever watched a child figure out which chair is hers and which chair is for someone the family actually wanted there, then you already know what I mean when I say that Nora figured it out by the time she was 6. Kids always figure it out. We just like to believe they don't. If you have ever been the child who got the smaller bedroom and the off-brand birthday cake while the favored one got the party with the rented bouncy castle and the personalized invitations printed at the stationery store, if you have ever smiled at a dinner table while something in your chest quietly filed the information away, then you are the person I am talking to right now. Stay. Because what I did next is the part my mother never saw coming. If you are already feeling something, hit subscribe. I post these stories because I think the people who lived them deserve to hear them told out loud, without apology, by someone who came out the other side. And if what I just described sounds familiar, if you have sat at table 11 in your own life, near the kitchen, far from the center, give this a like right now. That like is yours! It was always yours! And tell me in the comments, have you ever been introduced as less than you were by someone who was supposed to know better? I read every single one. I want to know. Now let me tell you about the rules. My mother's rules were architectural. They did not look like preferences. They looked like principles, and they were presented with the calm authority of someone who genuinely believes their own framing. The rules existed to govern the small economies of family life. Who received what? Who attended what? Who was expected to contribute, and in what proportion? The rules were clean, simple, and, if you did not examine the exceptions, they appeared to apply to everyone equally. They did not apply to everyone equally. There was, for example, the rule about family holidays. Everyone contributes to the group vacation fund. The rule was stated clearly when I was 19 and had just started working part-time while attending community college. Everyone contributes proportionally to their income. My contribution that first year was $230, almost a full week of wages. Cassandra, who was also working part-time, contributed nothing. Her income was roughly the same as mine. When I asked, quietly and without accusation, my mother said Cassandra was in a transition period. I did not ask what transition. I had learned by then that asking clarifying questions about the exceptions only ever produced more elaborate exceptions. The rule about the vacation fund continued for 9 years. In 9 years, Cassandra contributed twice. I have the bank statements, not because I kept them out of bitterness. I kept them because I have always been, at my core, someone who believes that documentation is a form of self-respect. There was the rule about family emergencies. Everyone shows up. I showed up. I drove 4 hours in February 2018 when my father had a minor cardiac event that turned out to be a severe panic attack. I drove 4 hours, took 2 days off work without pay, slept on the couch, and made sure he got to every follow-up appointment. The following spring, when I had emergency surgery for a ruptured ovarian cyst, Cassandra sent flowers. My mother called from a restaurant where she was having dinner with Cassandra's in-laws. She asked if Derek could handle it. Derek handled it, which he did without complaint, because Derek handles things without complaint. But I noticed. I always noticed. The most instructive rule was about the grandchildren. My mother had a rule, stated plainly when Nora was born, that she did not want to become a babysitting service. Grandparents should be grandparents, not childcare providers. She said this warmly, as a matter of personal philosophy, and I respected it. I arranged my work schedule around daycare and a neighborhood teenager named Sophia, who charges $12 an hour and is more reliable than anyone in my family. I arranged all of it myself. Cassandra's children, twin boys, 6 years old, named Bryce and Camden, spent every Thursday and most Saturdays at my parents' house. My mother picked them up from school. She had a drawer in the kitchen specifically stocked with their preferred snacks. She learned 2 card games she did not previously know, because Bryce liked them. She signed them up for a swimming program at the community center and drove them every week without being asked. When I mentioned this to my mother, gently, without accusation, the way you mention a factual inconsistency, she said, "Cassandra needs more support. You've always been more self-sufficient." She meant it as a compliment. I understood it as an invoice I had never agreed to pay. Rules were her favorite tool. They looked fair from the outside. The problem was they were mostly for me. I want to tell you about the gifts, because the gifts are where the pattern becomes undeniable, and I know how it sounds. Keeping a ledger of gifts is the kind of thing people use to dismiss you. But I am not talking about dollar amounts in the abstract. I am talking about what was communicated. I am talking about what it means when the wrapping paper says something that the giver doesn't realize they're saying. When Cassandra turned 16, my parents bought her a car. Not a first car that runs, but a car. A 4-year-old silver Honda with a red bow on the hood, parked in the driveway with a card that said, "You earned it, sweetheart." There were photographs. My mother posted the photographs on Facebook and received 72 likes. The bow was enormous. I remember thinking it looked like a prop from a movie about a normal American family. When I turned 16, I received a bus pass. My mother had an explanation that was ready before I finished opening the card. The family budget was tighter that year. Gas prices. My father had taken a pay cut. I would understand when I was older. I said, "Thank you." I took the bus. For 3 years I took the bus to school, to work, to the SAT prep center 14 stops away where I paid for the course myself with money from my weekend job at a garden center. I took the bus in November when it was dark by 4:30 and the stops were not well lit. I took the bus in February, in weather that did not care about my plans, and I carried the bus pass in my coat pocket like the thing it was, evidence that someone was paying attention. When I was 22 and had saved enough to buy my own first car, a 10-year-old Subaru with a dent in the rear passenger door that I drove for 7 years, my mother said, without any apparent awareness of the weight of the sentence. "You always preferred the bus, didn't you? You were always more independent." I have thought about that sentence many times since then. It required a rewrite of reality so complete that I genuinely cannot tell if she believed it. I have decided it doesn't matter whether she believed it. The sentence was said. It became part of the family record. Cassandra heard it and nodded, which means she had been hearing a version of it for years. For Cassandra's 30th birthday, my parents rented a private room at a restaurant downtown, invited 40 guests, paid for the dinner, and gave her a weekend trip to Charleston with spa credit. I helped organize the reservations, held my mother's credit card, made the calls. I did not receive a thank you because I was family, and family help is expected. For my 30th birthday, my parents sent a gift card to a chain restaurant Nora and I like. $100, 4 days late, with a note that said, "We know this is simple, but we've been so busy with the renovation." The renovation was a master bedroom addition to Cassandra's house. My parents paid for it, $47,000. The same month my mother called to ask if I could increase my monthly contribution by $350 because things were stretched thin. I increased it. I said nothing. For Nora's last birthday, my mother sent a card with a $20 bill inside. Bryce and Camden, the twins, received party celebrations at the Children's Museum with 12 guests each, a professional cake from the bakery on Elm Street that I know charges at minimum $300 for a themed cake because I priced one out once before, deciding Nora and I would make ours at home with food coloring and music on, and that was actually better. But I want you to understand, Nora saw the twins' birthdays on my mother's Facebook. She saw the cake. She said nothing, and her not saying anything was the most devastating thing she has ever done. The single most revealing thing my mother ever said. The sentence that contained everything, that said the whole system out loud without understanding that it did, came on an ordinary Tuesday when I called to check in, and she was listing everything she had done for Cassandra that week. The school pickup, the cooking, the help with the boys' dentist appointments. She paused, and then she said, "Cassandra just needs so much. You've always known how to take care of yourself. It's one of the things I admire about you." I admire about you. I sat with that for a long time. I am still sitting with it. Because what she said, translated into plain text, was this: I found it easier not to show up for you. And then I called it a quality. Now let me tell you about the money, because the money is where the abstract becomes concrete, and concrete is how things change. It started the way these things always start, with a reasonable request during a temporary difficulty. I was 26 and had just started my first salaried position. My parents were in a transitional period. My father had changed jobs. There was a gap in health insurance coverage. Things were tight. My mother called and asked if I could cover their supplemental insurance premium for a few months, just until things stabilized. $215 a month. Of course, I said. Stabilization took 8 years. By the time I was 33 and living in my own house with my own mortgage and a daughter and a partner and a full life that I had built entirely on my own, the monthly commitments had grown in the quiet, incremental way of things that are never discussed as a whole and only arrive one at a time. There was the supplemental insurance, now $340, because the plan had been upgraded. There was what my mother called the household support contribution, $350 a month, into a shared account that, as far as I could reconstruct, was used largely for the house that Cassandra and her family were renovating. There was the event fund, $120 a month, which covered the birthday celebrations and the holiday dinners, and the annual family photograph session for which my mother hired a photographer, and in which I appeared twice in 7 years, because Nora and I were always visiting the day before or the day after, depending on what I was told. There was the miscellaneous category, which was a phrase I had invented to describe the irregular requests that arrived by text message with amounts between $80 and $300 and subjects like the car inspection thing, or the thing with the gutters, or they're charging us more for the lawn service, and you know how your father is. One evening in March, sitting at my kitchen table after Nora was in bed, I opened my banking app and looked at the outgoing transactions for the previous 12 months. I added them up on a piece of paper, in pencil, the way my grandmother taught me to add. Slowly, column by column, so you don't miss anything. The number I wrote at the bottom of the column was $22,460. In 1 year. To a family that had purchased a car for my sister when we were teenagers and given me a bus pass, that had renovated an addition to Cassandra's bedroom, that had never once asked me whether any of this was something I could afford. I looked at the number for a long time. I was not angry. I was calculating. I was cataloging. I was deciding. That was when I stopped making excuses for them. But I want to tell you about Nora before I tell you about what I decided. Because Nora is the reason I decided anything at all. She is 8 years old, and she has a way of asking questions that is so careful it hurts. The care in her questions is not the care of a child who is unsure of herself. It is the care of a child who has learned that some questions, asked too directly, produce answers that make adults uncomfortable, and uncomfortable adults do not give honest answers. She has learned to approach the truth at an angle, the way you approach a skittish animal, slowly, sideways, not looking directly at it. The thing that broke something open in me happened in October, 4 months before the wedding. My mother had mentioned, casually, the way all of these things are mentioned casually, that Bryce and Camden were having their 6th birthday party at the Indoor Adventure Center on Route 9, the one with the climbing walls and the foam pits. and that it was going to be a sleepover situation with 6 of their closest friends. I happened to be on the phone with my mother while Nora was in the next room, and I saw the moment Nora heard the words, birthday party, and indoor adventure center, and understood she was not part of the sentence. She didn't make a sound. She just slowly put down the book she was reading. She was reading about vampire squid, I remember, because the cover was very purple. And she squared her shoulders. I watched her do that thing. I watched her square her shoulders and compress whatever she was feeling into a small, manageable shape. And then she picked the book back up. She was 6.5 when she first learned to do that. I know because I learned to do it at roughly the same age. 2 weeks later, in the car on the way back from a school pickup, she asked me a question. Does Grandma Linda love Bryce and Camden more than she loves me? She asked it looking out the window. She asked it in the voice she uses for factual questions, the same voice she uses to ask how deep the Mariana Trench is. Not accusatory, not wounded, just careful, angled, approaching the truth sideways. I pulled over. Not dramatically. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and turned off the radio and turned in my seat to look at her. She was looking out the window still, and her profile in the October afternoon light was something that should be illegal to look at when you are trying to keep yourself composed. I think Grandma Linda is better at showing love to some people than others, I said. And I think that is a problem with Grandma Linda. It is not a problem with you. She looked at me then. But she sees them more. She does. Is that because they're boys? I thought about that for a second. I don't think so. I think it's more complicated than that. Is it because of Mom? She meant. Is it because of something about you? Because of something you did? Because of some reason that traces back to me? No, I said. No, it is not because of me, and it is not because of you. It is because sometimes people have a harder time loving equally than they expect. And I should have noticed sooner. And I'm sorry. She looked out the window again. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Okay. And she picked up her book, which she had been carrying in her lap. A different one this time. Deep Sea Fish. She started reading. I sat there for another 30 seconds, which she didn't need, but I did, and then I pulled back into traffic. That was the moment I stopped looking away. I woke up the morning after my sister's wedding, the morning after my mother had introduced me to the governor's chief of staff as the daughter who never became anything, and the house was quiet in the way it is quiet when the air itself is settled. Not empty, settled, like a snow globe after the shaking stops. Derek was making coffee. I could hear the specific sounds of him, the cabinet, the drawer, the familiar small percussion of a person who has made coffee in your kitchen enough times that they know where everything is without looking. Nora was still asleep. The light coming through the curtains was that particular early morning gray that means the day has not decided what it wants to be yet. I sat up. I felt the thing I can only describe as a decision that had already been made. Not by me, consciously, but by whatever part of me had been watching and cataloging and waiting for the right moment. The internal argument had stopped. There was no more weighing, no more giving the benefit of the doubt, no more constructing explanations for behavior that did not require any explanation more complicated than this. They had decided what I was worth, and they had been announcing the number for 30 years, and the number was less than what I was actually worth, and I had been subsidizing the announcement. Derek appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs. He looked at me for a moment. Different today, he said. It was not a question. I'm going to cancel the transfers, I said. I said it the way you say a fact about the weather. It was a fact about the weather. He sat down next to me. He handed me the coffee. He said, "Okay. And I'm going to send her something," I said. "For the account. I've been thinking about it." He looked at the wall for a moment, not troubled, just considering. Then he nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Be here when the phone rings," I said. "That's all." He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked toward Nora's door, which was still closed. "She okay?" "She's going to be better," I said. "That's what I'm doing." A few minutes later, Nora appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas with the whale print, carrying a stuffed octopus she has had since she was 4. She looked at both of us. She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Why does it feel different?" She said it the same way she said everything, at an angle, approaching something. "Because something is different," I said. "Come get your cereal." She sat down. She was quiet, and then, as she was pouring her cereal, I watched her shoulders drop. Not in defeat, but in the way they drop when she relaxes, when she lets something go, when a tension she had been holding without realizing dissolves. She started humming, a song without a name that she makes up as she goes. That was when I knew. If my daughter wasn't welcome, neither were we, and neither was my money. I did it on a Tuesday morning, while Nora was at school and Derek was at work, and the house was mine. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and my phone and a cup of coffee going cold at my elbow, and I opened the banking app, and I began. The first item was the supplemental insurance premium, $340 a month. 8 years, 2 months of payments. I tapped the recurring transfer. End transfer. Confirmed with my fingerprint. 8 years, gone in 4 seconds. The second, the household support contribution, $350 monthly, into the shared account that functioned as Cassandra's household fund with my name as co-contributor. An arrangement I had agreed to in a phone call in 2021 when my mother said it would be temporary, and I said, "Okay." Ended. 4 seconds. The event fund, $120 a month, 6 years running. Gone. The 7 items in the miscellaneous category, the lawn service differential, the water softener rental, the secondary vehicle coverage, gone in under 2 minutes. The final item was the largest. 4 years earlier, at my mother's request, I had added myself to an emergency household account, just in case. It held $4,280, of which approximately $3,800 was money I had deposited in monthly increments. I transferred $3,800 back to my own account. Processing, 2 to 3 business days. I closed the app. I looked at the cold coffee and the light on the kitchen floor. I did not feel triumphant. I felt the sensation of having cleared a surface that had been cluttered so long you had forgotten it was a surface. The clutter was gone. The surface was there. It was Tuesday morning. I thought, this is why they liked the arrangement. It required nothing from them except my compliance. The final sentence came to me without effort. If my daughter wasn't welcome, my money wasn't either. Now I want to tell you about the gift. Because the gift is the part of this story that requires the most precision to explain, and I want to explain it precisely, because I did not send it in anger. I sent it as information. The gift was a letter. That's what was in the box, wrapped in plain brown paper, sent by certified mail with return receipt requested, so that I would know the exact moment it arrived. The box also contained, beneath the letter, a printed statement from my banking app. Not the full account history, which would have been too long, but a 12-month summary, organized by category, with the total at the bottom circled in blue pen. $22,460. Just the number. No annotation. The number speaks a language anyone can understand. The letter was 2 pages, written by hand, in the handwriting that Phyllis once told me looked like a person who decided what they meant before they picked up the pen. It began. Mom, I've spent a long time making excuses for the way things work in this family. I want to tell you that I'm done making those excuses, not with anger and not with a list of grievances, but as a simple statement of what is true. I wrote about the bus pass. I wrote about the birthday that didn't warrant a party while the twins had professional cakes and adventure center sleepovers. I wrote about Nora squaring her shoulders in the car and asking in her careful sideways voice whether Grandma Linda loved the twins more. I wrote about the $22,460, and I explained the math because I believe in math, and because the math does not require anyone to believe anything except the numbers. I wrote about the wedding. I wrote, when you introduced me to a man I have worked alongside in professional settings, as the daughter who never became anything, you did not embarrass me. You revealed something about yourself that I think you did not intend to reveal. I am not asking for an apology in response to this letter. I am asking you to read the number at the bottom of the page and sit with it. That number is what I contributed while learning to expect nothing. I will not be contributing it going forward. I ended with the sentence I had been carrying for 30 years. I know you love me in the way you know how. I need you to understand that the way you know how is not enough. I folded the letter. I placed it on top of the bank statement. I placed both in the box. I sealed the box. I taped it. I wrote the address in my neatest handwriting because presentation is its own form of precision. I sealed it. I dropped it at the post office on my way to work. Then I waited. The certified mail tracking showed a delivery confirmation on a Friday at 11:14 in the morning. I was in a meeting about riparian buffer zones when the notification arrived on my phone, and I set the phone face down on the table and continued the meeting. And I did not look at it again until the meeting was over, and I was standing in the parking lot with my coffee and the smell of spring on the air. Derek had taken Nora to visit Phyllis for the afternoon. Phyllis had planned this without knowing the exact timing. She just had, as she often did, a sense of when Nora needed space and good cooking and someone who noticed things. So the house was quiet when I came home. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table. I put my phone on the table in front of me. At 4:43, the phone rang. It was my mother. I answered on the third ring, because answering on the first ring would have communicated something I did not want to communicate, and because 3 rings felt like the correct interval between a decision and its execution. What is this? Her voice was the voice she uses when she needs things to be rearranged, high and very controlled, the way someone holds a cup too full of liquid. It's a letter, I said, and a bank statement. You are canceling? She paused. Maya, you've canceled everything. The insurance, yes. The household account, yes. I need you to explain to me what you think you are doing. I think I'm stopping something that wasn't fair, I said, and I think the statement is self-explanatory. 22,000. She stopped again. I could hear her breathing. This is because of the wedding. Maya, I didn't mean... It's not because of the wedding, I said. The wedding is the most recent item. The list is $22,460 long. That is family. That is what families do. Families do things in both directions, I said. That list goes in one direction. Your sister? My sister is not the subject of this conversation, I said. You are. There was a silence. I let it be a silence. I have learned, over many years, that the people who fill silences do so because they cannot bear what lives in them, and I was interested in what lived in this one. You're going to just walk away from your family, she said. It was not really a question. It was the sentence that was supposed to make me feel the cost of what I was doing. I'm not walking away from my family, I said. I'm stopping paying for it. Those are different things. Another silence. Then, your father is going to be very upset. Tell him I love him, I said. Tell him I'll call him next week. This conversation is between you and me. Maya, I'm going to hang up now, I said. I'll talk to you when you've had some time to read the letter again. And I hung up. The silence afterward was the most complete I had ever felt. Not empty, contained. The way a glass is complete when it is holding something clear. And for the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like space. The calls started the following Monday. My Aunt Patricia called at 8 in the morning, which means my mother had been making calls over the weekend. Patricia leads with concern and follows with accusation, and she navigated both in under 90 seconds. Honey, your mother is beside herself. Nobody can understand what you were thinking. You only have one family. This isn't how we handle things. I thanked her for calling. I told her the situation was between me and my parents. She said, but family. And I said, I agree, Patricia, which is why this is a family matter, and left it there. My uncle Dennis called and said, without preamble, your sister is very upset. I said, Cassandra is not involved in this. He said, she feels like she is. I said, that's worth exploring with a therapist. He was not expecting that. He said he'd check in later. He did not. My mother's oldest friend Rhonda sent a Facebook message that began, I know this isn't my place, but, and continued for 4 paragraphs. I did not respond. The texts came in waves, variations on the same script. Ungrateful, family is forever. You'll regret this when they're gone. I answered the first 3. Then I stopped, because I realized I was being asked to defend a factual document, and a factual document does not need defending. On the 4th day, my cousin Elena called. Elena is my mother's brother's daughter. She lives in Oregon and has not been to a family gathering in 5 years, and when she was at the last one, she spent most of it watching everything with the same flat expression I recognize from mirrors. She called and said, I heard what happened. Can I ask you something directly? Yes, I said. Did you document it? Yes, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, good, I believe you. And she said it simply, the way you confirm a fact, and I felt something in my chest settle that I had not realized was unsettled, not because I needed anyone to believe me. The documentation existed regardless of whether anyone believed it, but because hearing someone on the outside say out loud what I had known for years was the sound of a room finally being named correctly. She does this, Elena said. She did it to your dad too, when they were kids. I heard about it from my dad. It's a pattern. I did not know that. That doesn't fix it, Elena said. But I thought you should know. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me. Go live your life. The people who are calling you this week are calling you because they are scared of what it would mean if you're right. I thought about that after we hung up. I am still thinking about it. The invoice arrived on a Thursday, 10 days after the letter. It came on the letterhead of Premier Events and Celebrations, LLC, the company my mother had hired to organize the wedding reception. It was addressed to Maya Sullivan, account holder, co-guarantor, at my home address. Total, $14,285.60. Itemized, venue balance, catering overage, floral arrangements, staffing surcharge. My name in the billing contact field. I had attended the wedding as a guest. I had not signed any contract with this company. My only connection to them was that my mother had, at some point in the planning, listed me as an emergency contact, which is not, in any jurisdiction, a form of financial co-guarantee. I called the number on the letterhead. A man named Gary answered, not my father, a different Gary, and he sounded tired in the deep way of people who handle other people's disputes professionally. I explained I was not, and had never been, a guarantor. He pulled the file. He confirmed I appeared as an emergency contact only. He flagged it for review and said I would receive a corrected invoice with my name removed. I hung up. I sat for a moment. Then I thought, this is why they liked the arrangement. I carried their choices as if they were mine. This invoice was the clearest statement of that I had ever received. My name on a bill for a party that had not included my daughter, for a celebration at which I had been introduced as the daughter who never became anything. There was a specific satisfaction in having my name removed. Not joy. The quiet sensation of finally refusing to carry someone else's choices. They came on a Saturday afternoon. Nora saw the car from the window and came to find me with a particular quality of stillness she uses when she is trying to be a grown-up about something that frightens her. "There are a lot of people," she said. 4 of them, my mother, my father, Cassandra, and Cassandra's husband, Trevor. My mother was in front, determined. Cassandra was half a step behind, composing herself. She expected this to be difficult. I went to Nora and said, "Will you go to your room for me? You can have the big headphones. This will be done in about 20 minutes. She looked at me. "Are we in trouble?" "No," I said. "Not in any way. Go read about the Mariana Trench for me." She squared her shoulders, then consciously relaxed them. I watched her make the decision, and went to her room. I heard the headphones settle over her ears. I opened the front door before they knocked. My mother said, "We need to talk." What she meant was, "You need to listen." "Come in," I said. "I'll make coffee." We sat in the living room. Derek was in the corner chair, hands folded. He had moved there when they arrived and stayed, which is the kind of support that doesn't require explanation. My father looked at the floor, at the walls, at the framed photograph of Nora at age 3 on the bookshelf, and something moved across his face that I recognized as the expression of a person who knows the right thing and is deciding whether to do it. My mother said, "What you did was cruel." "I canceled bank transfers," I said. "You sent that letter in front of the whole family." "I sent that letter to you," I said. "If you shared it, that was your choice. You embarrassed us. You introduced me to a senior government official as a daughter who never became anything," I said, "at a public dinner, with a microphone on." Cassandra said, "She didn't mean it like that." "I know you believe that," I said. I looked at her directly. "How did she mean it?" Cassandra was quiet. She smoothed her skirt. "She is not a cruel person. She is a person who has been inside a system so long that the system looks like the world to her. She genuinely does not fully understand what she has benefited from." I saw that clearly in that moment, more clearly than I had ever seen it, and it made me less angry, not more. My mother said, "Family helps family. You know that." "Family helps family in both directions," I said. "I've been doing it in one direction for 8 years. I documented it." "You can't put a price on family." "Someone put that price on it," I said. "That's what the statement shows. $22,460. Someone made those choices and it wasn't me." Trevor coughed. He looked at his hands. He had done the math in his head since Monday, and he knew. My father said finally, "Maya." Just my name, in a voice smaller than I had heard it in years. "I know, Dad," I said. I should have said something, a long time ago. My mother turned to look at him. He did not look back at her. "You don't treat me like a daughter," I said. "You don't treat my child like a grandchild, and you still want my money." I said it plainly, not with cruelty, the precision of someone who has been waiting years for the right sentence. "I'm not saying I don't love you. I'm saying I can't keep pretending the arrangement is something other than what it is," Cassandra said, quietly, almost to herself. I didn't know it was that much. She had not known the dollar amount. The way she said it, absorbing it, not spinning it, told me she had always known something wasn't right. She had just been on the comfortable side of it. I stood. "I'm going to end this conversation now. Not because I'm angry. Because Nora is in the next room and old enough to understand tone through headphones." I walked to the front door. I opened it. My mother said, "Maya, if you would just—" "I love you," I said. "Good night." The door closed. Not a slam. A soft click. I stood inside for a moment. I could hear the faint sound of Nora's headphones, a tinny and far-away music. My hands were trembling. Not much, not dramatically, just the physical echo of being held together under pressure. I looked at my hands. About 10 seconds. Then they stopped. Derek appeared from the living room doorway. He looked at me. He did not say anything. He held out his hand. I took it, and we stood there for a moment. And that was enough. Nora opened her bedroom door about 10 minutes later. She stepped out slowly, holding the stuffed octopus, looking at me with a question in her posture. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. Again, the careful voice, the angled approach. I crouched to her level. I looked at her at eye height, which is the only height that matters. "No," I said. "We are not in trouble. None of this is your fault. Not a single piece of it." She considered this. "What happened?" "I told Grandma Linda and Grandpa Gary some true things," I said. "And now they're going to have to think about them." "Were the true things sad?" "For them, maybe. For us, I think they were going to make things better." She looked at me for a moment with the specific assessment of an 8-year-old who is deciding whether to trust an adult's optimism. Then she seemed to make a decision. She settled against me. I put my arm around her. She was warm and smelled like the coconut shampoo she likes, and she hummed one short note of her wordless song. I understood that everything I had done, every canceled transfer, every sealed letter, every soft click of a door, had been for this. For her shoulders to drop, for her to hum. She looked lighter, and I understood that was exactly why I had done all of it. 6 months later, the house was different. Not quieter. Lighter. The financial weight was the most immediate. The $22,460 flowing outward each year was now staying, and the difference showed in small freedoms. I had the Subaru's heating fixed properly, a repair I'd deferred through 2 winters. I bought Nora a pair of boots she'd mentioned once, and not asked for again, because she'd learned not to ask twice. When she unwrapped them, she went very still, and then hugged me with the force of a child who has understood that things can, sometimes, be enough. The guest bedroom that had been storage for 2 years was cleared and painted a color Nora chose. Mineral blue, which looks different at different hours of the day. She started a log. She writes the time and the light quality in a notebook with a whale on the cover. She brought it to school for show and tell. Derek noticed the change one morning over coffee. Not with words, just a glance across the table that said, "I see this too. Sometimes the most important language is the kind that doesn't need anything." My mother still sent messages. They arrived less frequently now, and they were different in character. Less accusation, more grievance, which is not the same thing. I read them and responded to the ones that were addressed to me as a person rather than as a problem to be managed. I was brief. I was not cold. I was practicing what I had decided I would practice. Honest engagement, bounded by a rule that I had stated clearly and that I intended to keep. The rule was simple. If the conversation turned toward the old pattern, the comparing, the rule language, the implied arithmetic of who had contributed what, and whether it was fair in my mother's estimation, I said one sentence. I'm going to end this conversation now, but I'll call you next week. And then I ended the conversation, not with anger, with the same soft click I had used on the front door. She tested it, once, about 3 months in. She was on the phone telling me about Cassandra's new job, and then she said, "Of course it's easier for some people to find opportunities, isn't it? Not everyone has the luxury of a career that just shows up." She said it lightly. She did not realize what she was saying, or she realized and was testing. I said, "I'm going to end this conversation now, but I'll call you next week." I ended the call. 4 minutes later, my phone rang. It was her. I answered. The conversation was shorter, more careful, better. That is not reconciliation. It is not what the movies mean when they show the scene where everyone cries and the music swells and a truth is finally spoken into a room full of people who needed to hear it. It was a phone call. It lasted 11 minutes. It covered the kitchen faucet I had fixed, whether Nora was doing well in school, and something my father had read in a magazine about deep-sea bioluminescence that she wanted to pass on to Nora. The word normal does not do it justice, but it is the closest word I have. It was normal, in a way that almost no conversation with my mother has ever been. I told Nora about the bioluminescence article. She took notes. What I found out about my mother after the financial support was cut, I found out through the slow, unreliable, sometimes accurate network of family information. Elena calling to relay things she had heard, my father mentioning practical matters in his brief and careful way, Cassandra, unexpectedly, sending a text 3 months later that said, "I think we need to talk. When you're ready." My parents moved from the house they had been in for 11 years to a smaller place in a different part of the county. My father says he prefers a smaller yard. My mother has characterized the move as something they were already considering. Perhaps that is even partly true. Trevor, Cassandra's husband, started working more hours at his firm, which he had apparently been able to do all along but had arranged not to. The twins are in an after-school program now, instead of going to my parents' house on Thursdays. Children are almost always fine when given structure and someone who notices them. My mother found part-time work at a garden center, the kind of coincidence I will not assign too much meaning to. She mentioned it on the phone in passing. "I'm doing it for something to do," she said. I said that was great, and I meant it. They managed. They always could have. They just preferred not to when I was available. I want to say something about love, because it matters. It is easy to conclude that the people who treated you badly simply did not love you. It is not that simple. My mother loves me. The love is real and also, somehow, unable to organize itself into equality. The love and the preference exist in the same person, often in the same sentence, and the work of my adult life has been learning to receive the love without disappearing into the preference. About 8 months after the wedding, Cassandra called on a Sunday evening. She sounded careful, like someone who had rehearsed and then abandoned the script. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about how things were." She told me Trevor had made a spreadsheet. "He is an accountant, so he did it properly," she said. "I didn't know the extent of it. I knew some of it wasn't equal, but I told myself the story Mom told, that you were independent, that you chose it." She stopped. I was just repeating it because it was easier. I know, I said. I'm not asking you to do anything, she said. I just wanted to tell you that I see what you were carrying, and I'm sorry I let you carry it. We talked for another 20 minutes, carefully, about practical things. The boys. Nora. What a Sunday afternoon might look like sometime with cousins who barely know each other. We did not resolve anything dramatic. We agreed to a phone call in 2 weeks. When I hung up, Derek looked up from his book. How do you feel? He asked. Steady, I said. The conversation I did not expect happened with my father, a Sunday afternoon in October, about 9 months after the wedding. He came to fix the garage door spring, the kind of problem he solves to express things he cannot say otherwise. I made coffee, and we sat in the kitchen while the afternoon light came through at that particular October angle that holds everything in amber. He had brought an old photo album from the move. He opened it and we looked at photographs for a while without saying much, and then he turned to a page near the back I had not seen before. A photograph of my father as a boy, about 10 years old, standing at a birthday cake with 2 candles on it, not 10. The expression on his face was the expression I know from Nora squaring her shoulders in the car. From my own face in mirrors since I was 6. There were 2 brothers, my father said. My Uncle Sal was the favorite. From the time he was born, nobody else got equal. He looked at the table. I spent 30 years telling myself it made me stronger, that I was the independent one. He stopped. I didn't know I was doing it again until you sent the letter. I'm not making excuses, he said. I should have said something. I watched your mother and I said nothing. For 30 years. And I'm sorry. I said, I believe you. But knowing that doesn't undo what happened. What matters is what you do now. He closed the album. I'm going to therapy, he said. Started 2 weeks ago. The doctor asked me about family patterns. I talked for most of the hour. He almost smiled. Apparently, I had material. He patted my hand twice. 1, 2. A gesture I could not have told you, a year ago, he was capable of. He left at 4:30 with a Tupperware of leftovers and the album under his arm. I watched him pull out of the driveway. This is what change looks like. Not the tearful movie scene, 2 pats on the hand, a therapy appointment, a photograph I had never seen. The family wasn't fixed, but it was different. The way a bone is different after it breaks and sets, stronger at the fracture, aching when it rains. I keep the bank statement in the second drawer of my desk, not the 12-month summary I sent with the letter, the longer one, the full 8-year history, printed in 6 pages of close type and filed in a manila envelope with the date written on the front in my own handwriting. I keep it because that document represents something specific, the evidence that I was there, every month, showing up to a life that told me I was optional, and showing up anyway. That is not a testimony of suffering. It is a testimony of consistency, of a person who did what she said she would do, even when what she said she would do was not being matched. I have a car now. A 3-year-old dark green Forester that I bought in February of this year, with a down payment I had been able to save because $22,000 a year had stopped flowing in the wrong direction. It is not a flashy car. It is the correct car for the life I have, which includes an 8-year-old who puts whale stickers on the back seat and a partner who loads it with equipment for weekend hikes and a job that occasionally requires driving on roads that are not fully maintained. The car is the receipt, the proof that someone was paying attention, that someone was me. What I built myself. The job, the house, the car, the savings account now past the emergency fund line. The professional reputation that made someone turn in his chair at a wedding reception and say, "Wait, is that the woman who..." because I spent 3 months leading a negotiation over a 100,000-acre watershed easement, the hardest and best work of my professional life, while managing a mortgage and a child and a family situation that would have made most people drop something. I did not drop anything. I set things down deliberately, and I picked up what mattered. The car is not the point of the story. The car is the receipt, the proof that someone was paying attention. I want to talk to you now, not as the narrator of a story, but as a person sitting beside you, telling you something true. If you grew up as the child who got less, the smaller bedroom, the second-hand version of the thing your sibling got new, the birthday that was acknowledged rather than celebrated, the compliment that was also an excuse. You've always been so easy. You never needed much. You handle things so well. I want you to hear this precisely. You were not easy to love. You were easy to overlook, and those are not the same thing. Easy meant you did not make demands. You smiled at the table. You said thank you for gifts that hurt. You arranged your disappointment into something small and manageable and put it away somewhere that would not inconvenience anyone. You did this because you were observant, and you had observed that demanding attention cost you more than silence did. You were right about the math of that particular family economy. That does not mean the economy was correct. You were not hard to love. You were just the one they practiced a different kind of love on. The theoretical kind, the love that says of course and always, but that shows up in fewer photographs, in smaller birthdays, in the shape of the absence that surrounds you at tables where everyone is technically present. You are not imagining it. The pattern is real. The evidence exists. It lives in the wrapping paper and the dollar amounts and the body language of the favored one, who never asked to be the favored one but who also never questioned it. Because questioning your good fortune requires a courage most people are not asked to practice. The strongest thing I ever did was not cancel a bank transfer. The strongest thing I ever did was look at my 8-year-old daughter squaring her shoulders in the back seat of a car and say, "No, this does not continue. Not to her. Not like this. You deserved the party. You deserved the car with the red bow. You deserved the voice that said your name with pride in front of people who needed to hear it. The fact that you survived without those things, that you built something real from materials you gathered yourself, does not mean you did not deserve them. It means you were stronger than the situation required, and strength should not be its own justification for deprivation. There is probably someone in your story who saw you when no one else did. A grandmother who kept your drawings, an uncle who showed up to the performance no one else came to, a neighbor who said, without making a production of it, "You're worth more than that," a teacher who wrote a note on a paper you have kept folded in your desk because no one had ever said that specific thing to you before. Find that person. Say their name in your head right now. They told you something true. They were right. I have Phyllis, Derek's mother, who bakes poorly and sees everything, who showed up to Nora's second birthday with a handmade card that said, "You are so completely wonderful," and said it to Nora, and then looked at me and said it again, meaning both of us. Who knows what it looks like when a child is trying to make herself small enough not to be a burden, and who refuses to let that happen in her presence. The current relationship with my mother is a phone call every 10 days, sometimes pleasant, sometimes careful, always bounded by the rule. She tested it once. I executed. She called back 4 minutes later. That conversation was better. Test, execute, better. Incremental, real, imperfect. My father goes to therapy on Wednesdays. He called last month just to tell Nora something he had read about the Hadal Zone. She talked to him for 20 minutes, the longest she has ever talked to him. When she hung up, she said, "Grandpa Gary knows about fish." Which is not true, but it is the warmest thing she has ever said about him. Cassandra and I had lunch 2 months ago, just the two of us, downtown. We talked for 2 hours. It was not easy, and it was not comfortable, and it was real. She said she has been in her own therapy since the conversations after the wedding. She said, "I think I was afraid that if things equalized, I would have less." I said, "I know." She said, "Is that terrible?" I said, "It's human." Then she said, "She told me you always preferred the bus." I said, "I know." She said, "I repeated it for 20 years. I said, "I know." She looked at me. "I'm sorry." Simple. No preamble, no mitigating circumstances, just those 2 words. "I know," I said. And the lunch continued. Not repaired, not healed, but different. Honestly, different. It's not a perfect family. It's a different one. And different is enough. I am sitting in the parking lot of the land trust office where I work. It is late afternoon, and the light is doing that thing it does in late spring, coming in at a low angle that makes everything look deliberate, as if the world arranged itself to be looked at from this exact angle at this exact hour. I have the window down. There is a smell in the air that is cut grass and recent rain and something I cannot name, but that means, to me, that it is almost summer, and the watershed project is 3 months closed, and my daughter's school play is on Thursday. On the seat next to me, there is a set of keys. My own keys. The house, the Forester, the office, the lock on the storage unit where I keep the documents that matter. The keychain is a small brass ring with a brown paper tag tied to it with kitchen twine, the kind of tag you might use on a gift or a jar. The handwriting on the tag is Phyllis's, and it says, "You were always worth it. P." She gave it to me a year ago when she heard what I had done. Not the letter, not the transfers, but the larger decision. The decision to stop diminishing what I was worth to make the people around me more comfortable. She tied the tag to my keys without fanfare, without a speech, with the 2 pats on the back that seemed to be the language of the people who love me best. She said, "Keep that where you can read it." I read it most mornings when I start the car. Not as a ritual, not as affirmation, just as a fact that I find it useful to verify. You were always worth it. Someone thought so. Someone planned in silence for months and executed an action with legal permanence and said, "Here, this is what I think you are worth." And she was right. If I could say one thing to myself at 6 years old, sitting in the back of a car and squaring my shoulders against something I could not yet name, I would say this: you are not imagining it. You are correct. Hold the evidence. Keep the receipts. And do not mistake someone else's failure of imagination for a verdict on what you are worth. I start the car. I back out of the parking spot. I drive home. My daughter is going to be there when I arrive. She is probably reading something about the ocean. We are going to make dinner together, and there will be music on, and she will hum the wordless song, and the kitchen will smell like garlic, and she will show me something she found in a book about a fish that produces its own light in absolute darkness, and I will look at it with her, and we will sit together in the ordinary, sufficient, irreplaceable evening, which is ours. If you are the person who grew up squaring your shoulders at tables where you were technically present, I need you to know that you can stop. Not all at once, not without grief, not without the long work of unlearning what years of practice made automatic. But you can stop. You can put down the weight. You can stop carrying choices that were never yours to carry. And if you want to know what that feels like, if you want to hear what I did next, and what my mother said when she finally read the number on the page, and what happened 6 months after that, and what Phyllis did on the day of the watershed signing that made me pull over and sit in my car for 10 minutes unable to speak, then hit subscribe right now. Because that is the next chapter, and you deserve to hear it. If you grew up as the child who got less, this like belongs to you, not to me. Press it for yourself. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been the person at table 11? The one near the kitchen, technically invited, not really expected? I want to know. I am going to read every single one, because the people who learn to square their shoulders and carry the weight and say thank you for gifts that hurt are the people who build the steadiest things, and I want to hear about what you built. That is the whole story, or the part of it I can tell you today. I went home and my daughter was reading about the Hadal Zone, and she looked up at me when I came in and said, "Did you know there are fish down there that have never seen light?" And I said, "I did know that." And she said, "But they figured out how to make their own." And I said, "Yeah, they did." She went back to her book. I hung up my keys. The tag said what it always says. You were always worth it.